Thank you, Dr. Watson, Dr. Abdul Mawjood, and Mr. Abdul Azzuddin. Is he still with us? You know, I'm okay. You know, I'm originally from Palestine. I was born in Egypt. I left it before you left it, because I left it when I was like 3 months old. And I am a Jordanian citizen. I live as a refugee in Jordan. And I want you to know that this man who's talking to us from Gaza, is a living example of injustices. It's not only about the electricity that they have to distribute it like 6 hours for each section a day, but it's also about the food and the diet that are being forced on them. I don't know how many of you heard of this program that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, of course it's not a defense forces, it's an attack forces, are imposing on Gazan people, which is Gaza, which is under siege. According to a document that was released by the Israeli army by the order of the Israeli court, the Gazan people are living on a 2,790 calories per day per person. And the reason why, according to that document, that they want the people of Gaza to starve but not to die. To starve but not to die. So I will tell you this. Gaza is not only besieged by the Israelis, supposedly, quote unquote, the Jews. It is also besieged by the Egyptian government, supposedly, quote unquote, Muslims. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I believe, and I'm sure that every one of us believes here, that Judaism, Christianity, Islam do not condone injustices. And what is being done in the name of Judaism and in the name of Islam is more of a corruption and a mischief. I'm saying this because I spoke politics this afternoon or early in the morning, and now I want to broaden a little bit the context. You know, there is a verse in the Holy Quran, and I will relate why am I bringing the Quran here. There is a verse in the Holy Quran that defines to us, Muslims, the main objective of the creation of mankind, where God says that God sent down or sent the prophets or the apostles with the proofs and sent down with them the book and the balance in order for mankind to stand for justice, to implement justice. That's the main objective of creating mankind, to stand and to implement justice. And we were talking about people like Malcolm X, people like Martin Luther King, people like Rosa Parks, other peoples of conscience from any religion. When we talk about people of conscience, they are living and they are embodying the true essence and the main objective of our creation, regardless of what religion or what faith we come from. That's what they stood for. They stood for something, for a larger cause, a cause that goes beyond their own personalities. And they paid for it. They sacrificed for it. When I look here at our situation, at our example today in America, if it wasn't for these great people, we wouldn't be sitting here talking freely today. We wouldn't have a president from an African descent. But because of their sacrifices, we've seen it as a reality. We're living it today. And again, it goes back to the main essence of our creation, to the main objective, that we were created to stand for justice, to implement justice, and to fight oppression and injustices, whether it comes from a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian. So you will not have a corrupt religious institutions or a corrupt religion. You will have corrupt people and corrupt religious people. I'm saying this because when you look at the situation in Egypt today, you look at the situation in Syria today, you will find that the oppression and repression and injustices are being justified by religious so-called scholars who are teaching us that it is the obedience that we are commanded to fulfill to our rulers, that we have to show them obedience in the name of religion. A huge distortion of religion. We are being told that you should live as a flock of sheep, to be fed, to get fatter, to be slaughtered at the end of the day. And I'm saying this because, because some say, and I heard this today after I finished my lecture, a friend of mine told me, when are you going to be rational? When are you going to, think of yourself and your family and your life? He said, I don't know now if you can go back to Jordan. You're not having a good life in America because my name is being distorted by, I'll say it, the Zionist lobby. Okay? So if you Google my name, as my daughter once did, when she turned 13, she wanted to try her abilities, and she went and Googled my name, and she came to me, Baba, who are you? They're saying all of these weird things about you. And I said, you should be proud of your father because I stand for a just cause. One day you will understand. So, as I was told today, grow up. But if I will grow up, according to this definition, then I will live as a slave. And I will accept the life of a slave. And then there is no meaning to anyone's life once you accept to live as a slave. Ask the African Americans, and I hate this description of Africans as African Americans. We were created with different colors, different tongues, coming from different ethnicities. We're all humans. We were all created in dignity and honor, as every religion teaches. Okay? If they had accepted the life of slavery, maybe they would spare themselves many of the sacrifices that they had to suffer, but they won't be living as humans today. They would be still treated as 2/3 of a human of a vote. Is that what the Constitution used to say? That they were treated as full humans, full citizens, not only citizens. If we will accept this in Syria today, if we will accept this in Jordan today, if we will accept this in Saudi Arabia today, if we will accept this even as Americans, to just live by as a carol, just to live about our own life and to worry about our own lives and to get things just get by us and not to be involved and not to check the politics and the policies of our government, then we accept to be a sheep flock because we're doing nothing to change this status quo. We do nothing to own our future, to own our destiny, to be part of the decision making. And we allow injustices to be done in our names, like the injustice that is taking place in Gaza today, with the full support of our own government, starving people to death, not allowing them to seek treatment, not allowing them to import medicine, not allowing them to have milk to feed their babies and their infants. It is being done in our name. So it's not only about the brutal regime in Syria. It's not only about the brutal coup regime in Egypt. It's not only about these morons that govern in the so-called third world. It is also about us, because we accepted to become the superpower of this world, and we accepted or we resigned to this claim that we are an exceptional state and an exceptional nation. Well, an exceptional nation, it's not a word that we utter. It is a substance that, or it is a meaning that needs to be substantiated. We need to show it, to show for it, and to prove it that we deserve to be called an exceptional state, standing for what is right, standing for what is right, and fighting evil. And I will end with this quotation of Patrick Henry, and I'm sure every one of you know who Patrick Henry is, or was. He was the governor of Virginia, who said, "Give me liberty or give me death." If you apply to the US citizenship, I'm sure many of you did. Many of you were born Americans. Maybe you didn't have to learn about it, or maybe you took it in school and forgot about it. Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death." Maybe we do not appreciate it here today in America. He appreciated it in 1775 when they used to fight the British colonialism. But that's what we live in our back homes. That's what we live where we came from. Our demand is to give us freedom, or there is no reason for us to live as slaves. There is no reason for us to live as subjects. There is no reason for us, people who are educated, a very young population, to follow very old leaders, so-called leaders, who are illiterate, who have no vision, who have no education, and can't see a future, to subjugate us just to live under their brutal rules. It is time for us also here in America to stand for what is right, to demand our government to stand for what is right, and to demand our government not to support brutal regimes, not to support occupation, not to support dictatorship. Our president and the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that we were presented by these regimes with a formula. It is either stability or chaos. And according to her at the time in 2011, she said, well, reform is stability. Now we have backtracked that position and we're saying, no, actually, stability comes at the expense of freedom. If we accept this, and if we accept to project our power and our influence as Americans in a such way, then we're not doing a favor to this nation, to what we consider to be exceptional about this nation, and to the values that we all cherish in this country. That's why we were created, to stand for what is right and to do what is right and to live as humans, not as subhumans or a flock of sheep. And thank you.
And we'll now hear from Maya Sheikh Salah.
That's a tough act to follow. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
The title is Global Living in the Age of Revolution, a forum on Palestine, Egypt, Syria, and Somalia. Somalia is still waiting for its revolution. We haven't had a revolution since 1969. And 1969, it was a military coup, and that lasted till 1991, when we plunged into civil war. It was really, really bad. So bad that 35 nations sent peacekeeping forces to Somalia in 1992. That lasted about a couple of years, and there was a debacle with American troops fighting local forces and American troops getting really humbled. And what happened then was the Americans decided to pull out. And once the Americans pulled out in 1994, the rest of the 34 states followed suit. Somalia was again plunged into the abyss of the world where nobody really knew what was going on, who was in charge, what was happening. And that's when a lot of issues that eventually became world problems developed. You guys must have heard of the piracy issues. The location of Somalia, I talked earlier about the 3,000 kilometers of beautiful coastline. It's also the gateway to the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, such a very strategic location for shipping vessels. And so with nobody watching, the pirates thrived. And it cost the world a lot of money. So in December of 2006, the world authorized Somalia's neighbor, Ethiopia, to return to Somalia with troops. We didn't know that was going to be a domino effect that created what we now know as Al-Shabaab, but created more divisions between the communities in Somalia. And when the Ethiopians, some say it was an invasion of Ethiopians returning, the diaspora came into the picture. And I spoke earlier about the Somali Diaspora and the interconnectedness of the Somali Diaspora. In addition to sending educated Somalis to serve in government, the diaspora was also a recruitment ground for a lot of young men to return to fight alongside to get the Ethiopians out. And they were recruited also into Al-Shabaab. And this has made the Somali conflict an international conflict. We now are a big piece of the war on terror. We also a big piece on the war on piracy. And in internationalizing the Somali crisis, I believe it hasn't helped at all. About 2 years ago, Somalia had what they called the London Conference. It was touted very highly. About 45 countries showed up to the table. They pledged millions and millions of dollars in aid, trying to turn the country around. 2 years later, after the London Conference, I don't think there's one person who can point to anything positive. I mean, there are many Somalis in the audience. They can prove me wrong. One positive conference, one positive thing that came out of that London Conference. We're like, what happened to all the money that was pledged? What happened to all the programs that was pledged? So what I'm trying to say is the Somali diaspora continues to play an important role in Somalia in trying to change its political future, in trying to change its economic future. I've talked about the money that they send in every month, close to $1 billion. And in global living, we are still waiting for our revolution. There's a lot of movements in the Somali diaspora talk about returning en masse back home, trying to make a difference, but nothing really has happened that much. What's the situation today? There is the United Nations African Union Peacekeeping Force in Somalia today. There's about 17,000 peacekeeping forces from 7 African nations. And they are fighting a war. On some good days, they win against Al-Shabaab, and we're all celebrating. And other days, it seems like they're just spinning their wheels. I mean, how many Al-Shabaab are out there, for God's sake? And how much weaponry do they have? Why can't they eliminate them? And sometimes you wonder whether there's even intentions of completely getting rid of Al-Shabaab. I want to talk a little bit about that's in reflection of the current situation. But I want to talk a little bit about our humanity. I think what the diaspora has done in traveling to all these countries, in talking to people like you, is highlight our common humanity. I mean, I'm really humbled to hear a person from Gaza today, and him telling me about his story. I wish we had the same capacity to Skype with people right now in certain cities in Somalia that are in constant war. They don't seem to get any break. They're always on the path of being raided by Al-Shabaab, or the African Union coming in and cleaning Al-Shabaab out of the city, and they're in constant evacuation of their homes, and they're fleeing this war and fleeing that war. Malcolm X, Dr. Malcolm X, when he traveled and he returned to the US, I feel like, and I think Dr. Watson talked about it a little bit, his perspective changed. He was able to see the white man as a human and was able to place him in a role in seeking justice. And why I say this is because I believe in travels. I believe in traveling, and when you travel and you talk to people and you realize they're just like you, they want peace, they want to have a life, they want to have families, they just want to, you realize the humanity in all of us. I think I've lost this. In Minnesota, when we had the 35W bridge, I didn't live here. I was in the DC area. And the humanity that was raised, I felt the pain of every single person that was talking about knowing somebody. And it's funny, I didn't know anybody, but I had a friend who knew a Somali person who died and was part of the accident. Similarly, you know, in looking at the diaspora, every time there's something going on, you feel like, oh my God, here is another Somali who knows a Somali who died. The Norway massacre, there were 2 children in that camp who were Somali that we know of who died. And a global living world has made us all feel each other's tragedies more closely and be able to connect with each other that way. I want to tell you guys about something that always made me think about why was that. The Somali national anthem is called Somali Toso. For those of you who know, it goes something like this. Somali Toso, Toso Sputir Sadaye. And basically, it means, wake up, Somalis, wake up. And I feel like whoever gave us that song kind of knew we were in a deep, deep, deep slumber. We have not woken up yet. We seem to be sleeping. So maybe we either need to change our national anthem or we need to have the revolution. And I will leave you with Dr. Martin Luther King's quote, "Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere." Thank you.
Okay, now we open it up to you for questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand. We'll try to get a microphone to you. Please, you can direct the question to any of the speakers, or particularly, and please remember that our friend and brother from Gaza is welcoming questions as well. So we're live with him, and so it's up to you. Open it up to you, and we'll try to get a mic.
My name is Johnny Hamil, and I'm a student with Dr. Matthew in this class. I want to thank all of the panelists. Great job, powerful people. I want to be a part of all of you. Dr. Watson, you was elaborating on Malik Shabazz, and you was talking about him going to some international court or something. Is it true, or is it your opinion that Malik Shabazz was going to take the United States to court for human rights violations, and perhaps, you know, there's a lot of differences on opinions on whether he was assassinated by the Nation of Islam, was it the dope dealers in New York, et cetera, et cetera. Could you elaborate on that and give me your personal position, please?
Well, that's quite a question. Thank you. It's a big question. What I would say, based on my research for this set of remarks, and I won't read you any direct citations. I'll share them afterwards. Malcolm had a view that world pressure was one of the appropriate, dare I say, necessary strategies to leverage. I think when I was trying to talk about his abroad position and his return home, what he wanted to do was internationalize the domestic predicament and make local the African the global, right? And so that's where this kind of interrelated, interdependent thing shows up. So I absolutely think he invited African nations, as we see played out in Birmingham in 1963, where the Pravda newspaper in Russia got wind of what was going on, right? And so then the international community starts to leverage America's claims to democracy against itself by saying, but look at what you're doing to your own people, right? So Malcolm anticipated that African nations might do a similar thing sort of invoking the predicament of the black American, but moreover, in negotiating with America, saying, hey, you want this from us, well, you need to do this for us, which is to say, look out for our black brothers and sisters in your backyard. So I'm confident that he wanted the U.S. brought to the United Nations on human rights violations against black Americans, and you could imagine why the U.S. wouldn't have wanted that. So there were a lot of elements working to silence that world pressure as a strategy. Does that seem like an answer?
That's a good answer. Thank you very much, Rich.
Other questions?
May I say something before you ask question? I'm sorry. If we have questions for Mr. Azzuddin Kassab, because it is almost 3 o'clock a.m. there, so start with him, please.
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little more specifically about how the military coup in Egypt is affecting Palestinian people on the ground.
Let me answer it from an Egyptian
Yes,
perspective.
Go ahead.
Until the Palestinian perspectives gets ready, is he ready? I'll give him the priority.
لا.
لا.
ايوه كان السؤال بيقول ايه تاثير الانقلاب المصري عليكم في غزه؟
الانقلاب المصري الان ذبحنا من الوريد الى الوريد. اكبر تاثير الان نعاني من الانقلاب المصري اكثر من نظام مبارك، لانه يعتبر الان غزه عدو ويعتبر ان اهل فلسطين عدو له. أغلق المعابر، لم يجعل منفذ لا عبر أي شريان حياة، لا من تحت الأرض ولا من فوق الأرض، وهو قطع كافة الاتصالات بغزة وبالحكومة الفلسطينية، وهو معني أن يضيق الخناق على غزة وعلى أهل غزة حتى يسلموا الراية لهذا المحتل.
Okay. The coup in Egypt from a Palestinian perspective, and it's also the same from an Egyptian perspective. I would like, before I go into the specific translation, I would really like to send from you, specifically from me, a message to the people of Gaza. The whole world is standing with them because they have been suffering for decades. The worst crimes against humanity are committed in Gaza, and those people really deserve a support, and I encourage you to support people in Palestine and in Gaza. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think some of you may say, but why are you talking to us? We're Americans. What do we have to do with Gaza or Egypt or Somalia? Or if you really like to know what business do you have with this, just to check this following website. It's called If Americans Knew, KNEW. Please check out that website. It will tell you a lot. When the people in Gaza are killed, they look up at the airplane. It's called Apache. It's given to the Zionists in Palestine by the United States of America. When the coup took place in Egypt, the American administration is giving billions of dollars to the coup. That's why people in Egypt see their suffering connected to the United States of America, the same as people in Palestine. Now let me go to the specific translation. It says the coup in Egypt is slaughtering people in Gaza. the Arabic word says from this vein to the other vein. They're really being under, and the siege is almost complete. You know, students like you cannot leave Gaza to study. Let alone the students, even sick people. When there is no medication in Gaza, they would like to be able to travel to the rest of the world to get medication. They're not allowed to travel from the borders. He says the time now is worse than the time of Mubarak. You know, Mubarak was giving hard time to the people of Gaza. Now, under Sisi regime, under the coup in Egypt, the suffering is more. Borders are closed. In fact, the borders were closed the day the coup took place. The bloody coup in Egypt took place on July 3rd. The next day, the borders came to be closed. So that coup was not really directed against Egyptians, but it was also directed against the Palestinians. He said now there are no contacts. There used to be some contacts between Palestinian government in Gaza and the intelligence, military intelligence of Egypt, but there are no contacts so far. It is deplorable. It has to be condemned. It is inhumane for both Egypt and the United States of America to support the siege. Putting millions of people under siege is not the way to go. America is a great country. It has great ideals. People in the Arab world would like to see these ideals being lived in their life so that we can answer this question, why do they hate us? So that we can put an end to this hatred and we create a better world for all of us.
Do you feel that what I don't know, sorry, how he said that he didn't know anything about the Afro-American struggle before he got to America and how it's so well hidden? Do you think that kind of backtracks what Malcolm was reaching for, how he was trying to internationalize this issue that we have in this country, and how a lot of America's dirty laundry is kept hidden from other nations in the world so that when they do come, they don't realize that America does have its own set of problems within borders?
Okay. That's a great question. So, to make a quick aside, one thing that struck me in doing this research was how similar Malcolm X's political thinking was at the end of his life to Martin Luther King's political thinking at the end of his life. And I think part of the strategy of miseducation is to have us pit them against each other, right? This classic divide and conquer model. Because what King is doing famously in the letter from the Birmingham City Jail, talking about the interrelated structure of reality. I can't be what I am until you are what you are. Our interrelation, our interdependence. Malcolm is doing that globally, internationally. And the best way to frustrate that connectedness, because that's what I meant when I said there's got to be some binding medium, some glue that connects our struggle together, that identification. The best way to frustrate that is through what I call these strategies of disassociation. That is to say, I disconnect us through a miseducation. You forget about me, I forget about you. They tell me lies about you, they tell you lies about me, they keep me hidden from you. I don't know about your struggle, you don't know about mine. So we don't know that we've got brothers and sisters embroiled in a similar cause. So I absolutely agree with you in thinking that miseducation, keeping concealed. I so often hear from students, even in my courses here, that they encounter African American history relegated to that one paragraph or so in the history book. And I don't doubt that that's intentional or ideological. There's no accident that those omissions. My last thought is to say you can know as much about a person from what they say as what they leave out.
Okay, second question is for Dr. Osama. I heard you speak earlier today about Syria. What's happening? Okay, so I was reading earlier this week that the UN had to cut Syria food aid for lack of donor, like they didn't get enough money from donors, and how you said there that build tension with like Syria, Lebanon, or Syria and Jordan, we're having so many people, influx of refugees entering these countries?
I'm not sure if the UN is cutting food aid, because what I know that the UN says that we cannot deliver food and medicine and any kind of aid to the Syrian people inside Syria because of the lack of security. And the regime is accusing the opposition is accusing the regime, so it's a long story, no one can verify who's doing what. But whether the Syrian people are getting the aid that they deserve, I think there is a consensus that no, they're not, because it is a massive scale human crisis that is taking place in Syria now. When you talk about 3 million who are refugees in neighboring countries, and you're talking about 6 million who are displaced within Syria itself, you're talking about almost about half of the population. It's like comparing it to 150 million Americans who are either refugees or displaced within their own country. And the problem when we're talking about the displaced, we have to know that those who are displaced, some of them are Sunnis, some of them are Alawites, others are Kurds, and they're not accepted in certain areas because Syria now is being divided across sectarian and ethnic lines, unfortunately. So there is no more the Syrian identity anymore, and that's one of the the painful consequences of the conflict in Syria. Now, when we talk about the refugees who are in the neighboring countries, now it becomes a little bit more complicated. Take the example of Lebanon. Lebanon, you have a very tense sectarian equation in there. You have the Christians with different sects. You have Muslims, Shia and Sunnis, and those who are considered also to be Muslims. You have this tension within them. Now you add, and you have the Palestinian refugees who are almost 1 million plus in Lebanon. So now you add another 1 million Syrians who are mostly Arab Sunnis in Syria, in Lebanon, which is a very, very, very small country. I'm sure it's much smaller than Minnesota, okay? Minneapolis. Is it the state is Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
I come from the federal government from Washington, D.C. So it is a very small country. So you add 1 million refugees inside Syria, inside Lebanon. You have another 1 million at least Palestinians inside Lebanon with very limited resources, with very tense sectarian equation there. And you can see where things are going there. They're already complaining about it. And Hezbollah is involved in the fight in Syria. Some Sunnis are also involved, Lebanese Sunnis are involved in the fight in Syria. So this could spark another civil war inside Lebanon. In Jordan, also the same thing. Because in Jordan, you have the population split between 50% Palestinians who come from a Palestinian descent. Some say more. I come from a Palestinian descent, but I have a Jordanian citizenship. And you have the Jordanians who are afraid that Jordan will become the alternative country for the Palestinians, that the Israelis will not accept a Palestinian state, so they want to solve the problem of Palestine, the West Bank, at the expense of Jordan. Now you add to it, you add to these refugees, who are about 3 million maybe in Jordan, Palestinian, from a Palestinian descent, though mostly are Jordanians, but they still talk as Palestinians as I do, okay? And then you add to them another almost 1.5 million Syrian inside Jordan, with a very limited resources also, no water in Jordan, nothing. It's a very poor country, and you can see the human crisis there. Look at Turkey, another about 1.5 million refugees. So again, when we speak about the human cost to the Syrian people, it is massive. It is massive. I don't know who can, if there is a way to solve it, I doubt it. And where things are going from here, that's another problem we have, because I can't see an end in sight. There's no one can speak of an end in sight. So I think you are risking, and I don't often agree with John McCain, but I will agree with him here that what the U.S., the American policy in Syria or towards Syria is misguided and will backfire at our national interests in that part of the world. Because if we consider Jordan to be an ally, if we consider Lebanon to be an ally, if we consider Turkey to be an ally, I'm telling you, we are doing great harm to that part of the world that could spark unrest in the whole region. And if any unrest will happen in these three countries, trust me, it will go again, it will reach the Gulf states. So they're not going to be immune, they're not going to be out of it, and our national interest will be also jeopardized. So I don't think that our administration knows what it's doing, and I think Obama needs a little bit to be more informed, oriented about the politics of the Middle East, because I think he came with this confidence that he knows, because he lived in Indonesia, he's originally from Kenya, so he thought that he's like Malcolm X, well connected to the world affairs, but we discovered that he's not connected at all. He's not connected, and he's unable to appreciate the situation in that part of the world, and that's why our policies continues to be misguided in this context. Of course, Malcolm X was guided, rightfully guided.
This question is for Dr. Gardy, Dr. Osama, and Mr. Is it Kassab?
Yes.
This question is basically about, it's two questions actually, but I would first like to start off with America's knowledge of what's going on outside of our country is, we're ignorant when it comes to that. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's not because we don't want to know, but everything that is polarized around us is just about our country. So we don't know. We would have to actually seek it out to get the answer. My biggest question is, it's about Egypt. And the reason why I picked Egypt is because what is really behind the military's takeover of the Muslim Brotherhood? I mean, they were voted in, if I'm not mistaken. So what has happened within a relatively short time? And if this happens, as far as if the military continues to take over, is Egypt going to become a military state? Or what? Is it going to go into civil war? What is going to happen? And if that happens, if they become a military state, is that going to set the region off its course? Is that going to spill over into Palestine? Is that going to spill over into Syria? Is it just going to cause more problems than it should?
Thank you for asking this very important question concerning the situation in Egypt. Egypt now is in the crossroads. Egyptians are invited once again in history. But it is not really an Egyptian problem only. There are outside forces involved. I can name them easily. Number one, Israel. Number two, the United States of America. Number three, Saudi Arabia. Everywhere you go, people will say, yeah, these are the three major actors from outside. From inside, of course, the military, the corrupt military leaders, corrupt police, corrupt judiciary, and what have you. The old system, Mubarak system. Now, what they are fearful of is a democracy in the Arab world. The Arab world suffers from dictatorship oppression for the past 60 years. You know, after the end of colonialism, after the end of foreign colonialism, the Arab world came to be divided onto smaller countries. And each country is almost living like in a prison. And some of them are very few. Some countries are having like 750,000. Like, for example, look at the United Arab Emirates. Or look at Qatar. Very small countries. But those countries are not allowed to unite with one another. I always called for, there is United States of America, but there can also be United States of Arabia. USA, another USA over there. The challenge is that this USA does not want the other USA to exist. Why? It has many reasons. Number one is there is this fear that once the USA over there gets established, they're gonna stop the oil from coming here. And I assure Americans, We're not going to drink the oil, we have to sell it. But we would like to sell it fairly. And if we sell it fairly, there are people in Egypt now are starving to death where they can't find a place to sleep, they go to the graveyard. It is that the poverty line is 40% of Egyptians are living under poverty line. Why? Look at the situation in the Sudan or in Somalia or in many different parts in the Arab world. You will find lots of suffering, lots of poverty. And this USA has really to let the other USA exist and flourish in a democracy, not in a dictatorship. I remember a statement made by President George Bush, the junior. He said, we've been supporting dictatorship in the Arab world for the past 60 years. And it is time for us as Americans to stop supporting dictatorship. It is very unfortunate that under the presidency of someone like Barack Obama, whom we all hope that he would really support democracy in the Arab world, once the coup took place, the situation, the position of the President of the United States was not really up to the level of the ideals of what America, not even up to the ideals of what he promised us when he was in Cairo talking to the Egyptians about the importance of democracy. So there is this sense of betrayal from Egyptians in regard to America. America was supposed to support democracy, human rights. Look at when 529 people are sentenced to death in less than 5 hours. We expected America to say something, to tell the military, there is no way you're going to get the $1.5 billion. Why on earth? And I'm putting this question to all of you. Why on earth America would send this money when you may need it in your own poor areas in Minnesota and in other parts of the United States of America? This money is better spent here not to support dictatorship and the military. The military leadership in Egypt does not this money because they take that money and they spend it outside with their families. Who ends up suffering is the Egyptian. Can this continue? I tell you, it will not continue. Egyptians this time are determined. What Henry Patrick said, give me liberty or give me death. We're determined to say, never again. We're determined to say what the Syrians are saying, الموت ولا المذلة. We will prefer death to live as slaves. We're not going to do it. We are going to go all the way. We are in the streets of Egypt, and I call upon you to support the peaceful demonstrations in the streets of Egypt, to support the students who are marching day and night. You know how many times the coup authority postponed the schools? 3 times. We're not going to have a school for 1 week. And then students march again. Then 2 more weeks. And then they march again. And then 3 more weeks. Almost the term was over without the student being taught anything. And the students, not only the students, men and women of Egypt are determined. And I call upon all those who support freedom, justice, and democracy to support the people, to be informed about the situation in Egypt, and to support the students in Egypt, and to support the people who work for democracy of Egypt. I am very optimistic, in spite of the outside forces, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States, and in spite of the corrupt leaders of the military, the police, the will of the Egyptian people will be victorious, and they will be able to establish, and I am very happy to hear the possibility in Somalia of having a revolution. I will encourage any revolution on the face of the earth that calls for freedom, for justice, and for human rights, as long as it is done peacefully. Thank you.
ممكن تعليق؟
اتفضل اتفضل go ahead.
يعني أنا سأقول جملة للتاريخ. ربما نحن شباب ونعيش الثورة منذ الانتفاضة الأولى 1987. أنا من قلب غزة أحيي الرئيس محمد مرسي، رئيس الشرعي المصري المنتخب، لأنه الوحيد الذي أرسل رئيس وزراءه إلى غزة لكسر الحصار عن قطاع غزة وقام بفتح المعابر لتسيير الأمور علينا. ومن هنا الواجب أن نذكر هذا الرجل ونبلغه التحية من قلب غزة وهو في سجنه، وهو في سجنه حر وهو كريم وعزيز، والانقلاب إلى زوال، لأنه لا يقبل أي منطق عربي إنساني بشري أن تحاصر غزة من انقلاب يقتل شعبه. فنحن لسنا حزينين على ما يحصل لنا، لأنه من قتل شعبه سيقتل غيره من جيرانه وإخوانه في فلسطين.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. نعم. But he's saying that history tells, and we as young people of Palestine, from the heart of Gaza, he would like to send a strong message of support to the president of Egypt, who was elected by the people of Egypt, President Mohamed Morsi. And he considers him to be, in spite of the president being in jail now, he considers him to be the legitimate president of Egypt, who was first the only president who sent his prime minister to Gaza so that to lift the siege. And he opened all borders so that people of Gaza can get their education, their medication, and their treatment outside. And he promises that this coup in Egypt, because it is killing its own people, he says we don't expect this coup to support the people of Gaza. This coup is killing its own people. And because it is killing its own people, it will not hesitate to kill people of Gaza. And that's why he sent this strong message. The translation is over. My little bit addition to the translation is many people in Egypt would like to think of President Morsi as the new Mandela. When late Mandela passed away, President Morsi sent me with two messages. And I went to South Africa. I attended Mandela's funeral and I presented it to the people of South Africa. I heard very good stories from the people of South Africa. We need to continue this struggle of Mandela, of Malcolm X, of Martin Luther, so that people can live free, inshallah.
I'll just add one quick thing back to your question. Look, in Egypt, it's like in Israel. You have an army that have a state, or a state that belongs to an army. It's not a state that has an army. So in Egypt, you have the army controls, I think about 45%, maybe more of the Egyptian economy. And no one knows about it, by the way. They're secret investments. No one knows where the money goes. So it is an army that owns a country. So in Egyptian, they say it's a izbah, it's a garden. You know, a garden that belongs to the army. And is it going to spill over? I think we've seen, yes, we've seen it now. We've seen it now in Jordan, we've seen it in the Gulf states, we've seen it in Yemen, we've seen it in other countries, even in Libya, where the old regime structures are crawling back. They're trying to go back and to suppress the people. Another point that I want to add, in that part of the world, under these regimes, we're not being treated as citizens. We're being treated as subjects. We're subjects. We're not citizens. So we have this father-son mentality. You have to be respectful. When you speak about your leaders, you have to be respectful. Don't criticize them. If one of them sneezes, we have to make sure that we say, God blesses you from here. Okay? That's how we're being brought up. That's how we're being told to be and to act and to behave. But now it's coming to an end. One last thing when it comes about our foreign policy. Look, everyone knows, we know, that America is producing more oil, America is producing gas. Okay? So in a few years, we'll become self-sufficient when it comes to oil. We don't need that part of the world. Okay? So any one of us can, make this argument. Let's just disengage from that part of the world. That's fine. If we disengage, who's going to fill the void? Who's going to fill the vacuum? Now, we're projecting that China in 2020 will bypass the American economy, which will become the largest economy in the world in 2020. Okay? So they will happily go and fill the gap, the void there, and they will use or utilize that oil, these natural resources, to boost their economy. So we will end up with a China that is projected or poised to become the superpower in maybe another 20, 30 years from 2020. And we're already talking about this in the United States. So we're not doing that part of the world a favor that we're there. Actually, because it is in our best interest that we're there. It is in our best interest. Our economy blossomed because we use their oil there. Yes, I come from there, but I'm from here too. So I have two hats. So you know that we were the largest oil producer until 1942. The United States used to produce most of the oil worldwide, and we helped Europe to rebuild. But when we discovered the oil there, and it's much cheaper in terms of production, and we spare our own oil, we exhausted theirs. So we didn't do them a favor. We did ourselves a favor. So if we want to disengage, we want to be isolationist, well, we can. But at what expense? On whose expense? I'm telling you, it is on our own expense, at our own expense here. That's how it is. So again, we need to be informed, and we need to have a voice when it comes to our foreign policy, not only when it comes to our domestic policy there.
We have time for one more question from Mohammed, and a brief comment from our Professor Sida Mohammed of Arabic here, and then we'll close. Go ahead.
Okay, this is a question for both Dr. Abdul and Dr. Osama, and I have a separate question from about Somalia. Before President Obama ran for president, there was a video on YouTube around 2006. He was being interviewed, and he was asked, "What is the state?" And the question he gave was that the state is a monopolization of violence.
Oh.
It's a monopolization on violence. The state has the gun, the state has the guns, they have the prisons, they control the money. So if the peaceful revolutions that are going on in the Middle East, if they fail, what other solution do the revolutionaries, what other solutions do they have other than to turn to violence? And once they start using violence, what is going to be the consequence of that?
You insist on putting me in troubles now. It is a difficult question, and it is being asked all over Egypt. When the coup took place, we made a statement, a strategic statement, saying that our peacefulness is stronger than their bullets. It seems now it is not working. The more peaceful we are, the more brutal they become. When you see about 7,000 people got killed, some of them got burned alive. It is the worst massacre in the history of modern Egypt. When you see about 23,000 are in jail for no reason other than their political perspectives, they're called political prisoners. And the numbers are increasing. What to do? We're still determined to remain committed to our peacefulness. We believe that through peacefulness we'll be able to dismantle the coup. Are we naive? Possible. But we're determined to go all the way peacefully. I think we've won the moral ground. I think those who know what's going on in Egypt know that we have marches on day and night against the military coup. We're determined to bring it down. Already the country is collapsing economically. The state is failing economically, socially, and there is no political future for the country. We're determined to go all the way. Can violence or counter-violence, can it solve the problem? It remains to be a question. I hope Egyptians do not have to yield to counter-violence. I think it is not good. I don't like to see Egyptians killing Egyptians. I know some Egyptians are killing Egyptians now, but the counter-killing may not solve the problem. It's a very difficult question. Let us hope for the best. Let us hope that the peaceful marches will bring the coup down, and I call upon your support. You also, in your classes, when you write papers, try to talk about Palestine or Egypt or Syria. Bring these issues up, especially people coming from that part of the world. Bring them up so that in your own communities, in your own churches and mosques, bring these issues of justice, freedom, and human rights so that we're all conscious of this. Because the success of the experiment in Egypt, it's going to bring a lot of goodness to that part of the world. If Egypt fails and goes into counter-violence, oh, we're calling for a war of all against all. Because the borders of Egypt are open. Libya has lots of weapons. Palestine on the other side. The Sudan corner is available. Lots of weapons are in Africa. And this can really lead to Egyptians. You're talking about 90 millions. You're not talking about 15, 20 millions like the situation in Syria. We're talking about 90 millions. That can become disastrous. I hope people in power in the United States will realize before it is too late that if you leave the people of Egypt suffer being killed in the streets, and please call your senators, call your congressmen, tell them where do you stand vis-a-vis the coup in Egypt? Why is our money being sent to support the military against the people of Egypt? We have to be active as much as we can, and I hope we will be able to do it peacefully, inshallah.
Look, I think as I'll share Dr. Abdul Mawjood's hope that Egypt does not slide into violence. But the issue is that these regimes pave the way, create the conditions for violence, and then they condemn the victim. In Egypt, in Palestine, in other countries, these people are left with no option. It's not that I'm condoning it, but you cannot starve a person to death, cut off water from him, and then tell him you cannot steal to eat or to feed yourself and feed your family. That's what they're doing to their own people. They're starving them to death. They're leaving them with no option. Look at the Palestine-Israel example. Well, the international resolutions say that Israel has to withdraw, must withdraw from the 1967 occupied Palestine. Well, the Israelis are saying, well, we can't. It doesn't work for us. So what the Palestinians are left with? Well, to demand and to seek America and to beg America to interfere. Well, the Americans say, well, we tried, we cannot pressure the Israeli government. Okay, so the Israelis don't stop there. They go and they attack Gaza and they attack the West Bank and they kill thousands. And again, the Palestinians, what they're left with? Nothing, because according to our policy, if they will retaliate, if they will try to defend themselves, and they don't have the same, we're not talking about the two equal armies. They're called terrorists, and the state of Israel, the Israeli army, is called what? An ally of the United States. We're seeing the same thing taking place in Egypt. You're leaving people with no alternative. You're massacring them, you're killing them, you're arresting them, you're raping their women. Actually, you know, it's like raping American women here by our own police. That's what's happening in Egypt. And then you tell them, you're not allowed to open your mouth, you're not allowed to say anything, you're not allowed to fight back. Well, again, I'm still hoping that the Egyptians will adhere to the peacefulness. But is it a realistic approach? I'm not sure. I don't think that this is that's within the human capacity to maintain your calmness when you're being attacked, when you're being killed, when your family is being imprisoned, when you have no future, when you come to a point where you don't see any way out. I will give two more examples and I will end it with this. I will give you the example of Saudi Arabia. Our president visited Saudi Arabia just 2 weeks ago. According to our own administration officials, they said the president did not bring up the human rights issue because his plate was full with issues that needed to be negotiated, and we don't want to, irritate the Saudis. Now we need them. They're already irritated because of our policy or reapproachment with Iran. Okay, so we don't bring up the human rights issue. Now, do you know if you petition your government or the petition the king in Saudi Arabia, it will land you in jail. Just to petition the government. The same thing in UAE, and we're calling them allies. Okay, not only that. Remember when Dr. Abdul Mawjood this morning told us, or this afternoon told us, that he wants us to raise our hands with the Rabi'a symbol, the symbol of the massacre that took place in Egypt, the peaceful demonstrators who were massacred and killed by the Egyptian army and security apparatuses. You know that if you raise your hand and show your sympathy in Saudi Arabia now, in Egypt now, in Emirat now, in Jordan now, you will be arrested just for raising your hand like this. In Saudi Arabia, it will land you 3 years in jail. 3 years in jail. Just for raising, yes, it will land you 3 years in jail. In Jordan, they're arresting people, they don't go for 3 years in jail. They're arrested, they're detained for maybe a few hours, few days, and they're released after they pledge that they will not have this symbol again, that they will not raise their hands with this symbol again. Tell me, what kind of systems, what kind of regimes, what kind of shallowness, what kind of horizon that you're leaving for your own people? If I cannot open my mouth, if I cannot express my sympathy, if I cannot express my opinion, what do you expect people to do? You said that the state has a monopoly or exerts a monopoly over violence. Okay, we've seen the Syrian model. We've seen the Libyan model. Well, at one point, you will break with that model and you will say, you know what? I'm sorry for this. Screw it. I'm gonna bring down the ceiling on everyone's heads. Enough is enough. I'm not condoning it, I'm not justifying it, I'm not saying that this is the logical or the best route that we can, follow, but I'm sorry, you're not dealing with logical and rational people who are put in normal conditions. Just try to corner a cat and see what it will do to you. That's what they're doing to their own people. And and I will finish with this, I promise. You remember when Dr. Abdul Mawjood quoted President Bush Jr. when he quoted him when he said that 60 years of supporting tyrants and dictatorships in the Middle East brought us 9/11? This was back in 2003. This statement he made in 2003 when he came with this notion of democratizing the greater Middle East, if you still remember, when he wanted to democratize, quote unquote, the Middle East, greater Middle East. And Condoleezza Rice tried it in 2005 when she became Secretary of State in his second administration, when they pressured the Egyptian regime to hold elections, and they pressured Israel and the PA, the Palestinian Authority, to hold elections with the participation of Hamas. Then we punished the Palestinian people because, according to our Secretary of State at the time, Condoleezza Rice, when she said, when she was asked by NPR, these people, casted their vote. Why are we punishing them? She said they were not responsible in their vote. Well, excuse me, we elected George Bush twice. Excuse me. I mean, what? Why don't we go and besiege Israel because they elected Netanyahu twice or 3 times so far?
Under false pretenses.
Under false pretenses. Okay, so now we're doing this, and our own president, or the war president, is acknowledging that it is because of our policy overseas we're paying a price at home. So if we acknowledge this, if we accept this, it's not that people hate America because America is successful, or according to the infamous Bill O'Reilly, because we're beautiful, quote unquote. That's what he said, I swear, he said it. Okay? No one hates America because the American people are beautiful or because America is great. Actually, some of them hate America because they're not afforded the same rights, the same, beauty that we're witnessing, that we're experiencing, that we're living here in America. We're not affording them the same right to live as humans. What they want is to enjoy the rights that we're enjoying, to enjoy the life that we're enjoying, to enjoy the future that we all can envision for our children. That's why they're mad, not with America, with our foreign policy, not with the American people. And that's why when American people go to that part of the world, I will tell you, it is a lie that you're not safe in most of the Middle East. It is a lie. In some parts, yes, not only as an American, even me, if I go now to some parts in Syria, of course I'll be taken as a hostage or maybe killed. Okay? But it's because it's not safe for everybody. But not because you're an American. Actually, American people are considered to be very nice people, very kind, and very simple compared to the Europeans. That's how people look at them. They're very nice, they're easygoing. You know, they call you by your name, Osama. No, Dr. Osama, okay, I know we've been using this. Matthew, Dr. Charles, okay? You know, we're very simple people. That's what people like about America. But when they see that the same rights are not afforded to them, and they perceive it as, you know, because of the American influence, because of the American intervention, because of American foreign policy, we're not enjoying these rights. That's why when they get upset with our foreign policy and they get upset with us. Not because they hate America, because they want to live as Americans, as the Americans are living here.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Please give a wonderful applause to all of our presenters. And we hope to see you next year for the 3rd annual Malcolm X Justice and Peace Lecture Series. Thank you for coming.